My name is Lucy Medrano. I'm 31 years old, and I've never been the kind of woman who makes a scene. Even as a child, I learned that the safest way to exist in my family was to be small, agreeable, and invisible. When voices rose, I softened mine. When tensions flared, I smoothed them over. I became the one who apologized first, even when I hadn't done anything wrong. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that if I stayed quiet long enough, worked hard enough, and asked for nothing, maybe one day I'd earn a seat at the table. Maybe my family would finally see me as someone who mattered. Instead, I became the background. Growing up, I was labeled the sensitive one, the quiet one, the one who never really figured it out. My older brother, Victor, was everything I wasn't: loud, confident, commanding. He walked into a room and people listened. Our parents treated him like a finished masterpiece while I was always a draft that needed fixing. I couldn't leave a glass on the counter without being lectured about responsibility. But Victor once totaled our father's car and still got taken out to dinner afterward. His mistakes were stories. Mine were character flaws. He was the star of every family gathering, the overachieving son with the polished life trajectory. I was the daughter who took a detour. After high school, I didn't follow the path everyone expected. No college campus tours, no framed degrees, no prestigious internships. I drifted through freelance work, tech support contracts, online consulting. I built websites, automated marketing systems, and slowly carved out a digital business that didn't need an office or a title. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't come with holiday parties or lanyards, but it worked. Eventually, it worked very well. I never told my family how well. Part of that was insecurity, sure, but most of it was exhaustion. Every time I tried to explain what I did, I was met with polite confusion or thinly veiled condescension. Victor would smirk and say things like, "So, internet stuff," while my parents nodded, the way people do when they're pretending to understand something they've already decided doesn't count. When I started traveling more, working remotely from different countries, Victor joked that I was on a permanent vacation. It was easier to let them believe that than to fight for legitimacy I knew they'd never grant me. I moved out at 22 and gradually stopped coming around. It wasn't dramatic, no big argument, just a slow fading. My mother guilt-tripped me for not visiting enough, but she never asked how I was doing. My father only called when something needed fixing. And Victor, he was busy building his picture-perfect life, only remembering I existed when he needed a favor or an audience. When Victor got engaged, he sent a group message, a save the date, a single line. "Hope you can make it, Ellie." I replied with congratulations and meant it. Despite everything, I told myself his wedding could be a reset, a truce, proof that I still belonged. Then came the phone call. It was early spring when Victor called me out of nowhere, his voice unusually warm, almost sugary. I braced myself before he even finished saying my name. He talked about the wedding, about stress, about budgets. Then he slid into the request carefully framed as a favor. The venue they wanted was over budget. Our parents couldn't help. His fiance's family had already covered the honeymoon. And then came the justification. I didn't have kids, no mortgage, a flexible income. He said it like it was a compliment. When he told me the amount, $40,000, my stomach dropped. He called it a steal, said it would mean everything to him, said it was one big, meaningful thing I could do for my only brother. I didn't say yes right away. I asked questions. I hesitated, but the pressure mounted. My mother left a voicemail that ended with, "Don't be selfish, Lucy," and against my better judgment, I wired the money. I told them not to announce it, not to make a big deal. I didn't want applause, I just wanted peace. I truly believed that gesture might change something. I was wrong. If I'm honest, the moment the money left my account, a quiet dread settled in my chest. It wasn't panic, it was familiarity. That old feeling I'd spent most of my life trying to ignore, the sense that I had just crossed another invisible line for people who would never cross one for me. Victor didn't thank me right away. Days passed, then a brief text arrived. "Got it." Huge help. No heart. No call. No acknowledgement of what $40,000 actually meant. I told myself that was fine. He was busy. Weddings were stressful. I reminded myself over and over that I hadn't done this for praise. I'd done it because I wanted to believe we were capable of something better than the dynamic we'd been trapped in for decades. For a while, I let myself imagine what that might look like. Maybe at the wedding, Victor would pull me aside, hug me in front of everyone, and say something simple but honest. "I couldn't have done this without you." Maybe my parents would finally look at me differently, not as the difficult daughter who didn't follow the script, but as someone competent, generous, and worthy of respect. I didn't need a speech. I didn't need public credit. I just wanted to stop feeling like a footnote. As the wedding approached, I stayed out of the planning entirely. Victor never asked for input, and I didn't offer it. Occasionally, my mother would mention some detail flowers seating charts, catering as if she were updating me out of obligation rather than inclusion. Every conversation ended the same way, polite surface level, emotionally distant. I told myself not to read into it. On the outside, everything looked fine. I booked my flight, bought a dress that was understated but elegant. I even took a day off work to make sure I wouldn't arrive rushed or distracted. I wanted to show up fully present, open, ready to be part of my family's milestone instead of orbiting it from afar. What I didn't realize was that in their minds, I had already been sorted into a category useful but expendable. The wedding venue was breathtaking. A renovated barn surrounded by wildflowers, high ceilings strung with crystal chandeliers, soft lights glowing as the sun dipped behind the hills. It was the kind of place people posted online with captions about fairy tales and forever. I arrived early, standing for a moment in the gravel parking lot, taking it all in, reminding myself that I had helped make this possible. That thought lasted exactly 3 minutes. Inside, guests were already mingling champagne glasses, clinking laughter echoing through the space. I scanned the room for familiar faces, expecting at least one immediate acknowledgement. A smile, a wave, something. Nothing. I checked the seating chart and felt my chest tighten. I wasn't seated with family, not even close. My name was tucked between distant cousins and plus ones I'd never met. When I looked through the printed program out of curiosity, my name wasn't there at all. No mention, no role, no acknowledgement. I told myself it was an oversight. Victor was busy after all. I found my seat and sat quietly smoothing my dress, sipping my wine, pretending the knot forming in my stomach wasn't there. As the ceremony began, I watched my brother walk down the aisle, confident, smiling fully in his element. Our parents beamed from the front row, my mother dabbing at her eyes, like she was watching the culmination of a perfect story. I clapped when everyone else did. I smiled when expected. I played my part. Then the reception began, and with it came the first whispers. At first, they were subtle, laughter drifting from a table behind me. A name spoken too casually, my name, followed by a snort. "She still does that laptop thing, right?" someone said. Another voice chimed in louder this time. "I heard she lives above a dry cleaner. Probably came for the open bar." The laughter grew, not cruel enough to confront, not quiet enough to ignore. I stared down at my plate, my appetite gone, my ears burning. I didn't turn around. I didn't say anything. I had spent my entire life perfecting the art of swallowing discomfort, of pretending not to hear things that cut deeper than anyone realized. At the bar, it got worse. An uncle I barely spoke to muttered something about freeloaders. A cousin joked that I was probably hoping to network. Each comment stacked on top of the last until my chest felt tight, like I was breathing through a narrow straw. Still, I said nothing. I told myself that people talk, that weddings make people drunk and careless, that this wasn't worth reacting to. But then came the speeches. Victor's best man went first. Predictable jokes, easy laughter. Then came the maid of honor, glowing confident, holding her champagne glass like she was about to deliver something rehearsed. She talked about how selfless Victor was, how dedicated, how he had planned everything himself, every detail, every payment, every ounce of effort. The room erupted in applause. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet internal snap. Because this wasn't an oversight, it wasn't forgetfulness, it was a story, a carefully curated narrative where I didn't exist. I smiled. I clinked my glass when others did. I played the role they had assigned me. The invisible donor, the silent supporter, the woman whose generosity was convenient to erase. But inside, a different voice had begun to speak. And it wasn't asking for approval anymore. By the time the applause died down, I could feel it settling into my bones, that familiar, hollow sensation I'd carried since childhood. The kind that told me this wasn't an accident. This was normal. This was how things had always been, just dressed up now with fairy lights and champagne flutes. I excused myself and stepped outside, telling no one where I was going. The night air hit my face like a quiet mercy. I walked past the wraparound deck and into the gravel lot, pretending to check my phone while I focused on breathing. In through my nose, out through my mouth, count backward from 10. a trick I'd learned years ago in therapy back when I still thought the problem was me being too sensitive. It didn't help. Part of me wanted to leave, to get in my car drive until the venue disappeared in my rearview mirror and never look back, to block every number connected to my last name and finally accept what I'd been denying for decades, that there was no version of myself that would ever be enough for them. But another part of me, quieter and more stubborn, refused. "You paid for this," that voice said. "You earned the right to be here." So I went back inside. The dance floor was full now. Victor and his new spouse were laughing, spinning under the lights, surrounded by cheering guests. My parents sat near the head table, my mother filming everything, like she was capturing royalty in motion. My father leaned back in his chair, satisfied, proud, exactly as he always looked when Victor was center stage. I hovered at the edge of the room, unseen again, watching it all like an outsider at a party meant for someone else. When I finally made my way back to my table, the distant cousins were deep into a conversation about real estate investments. They didn't acknowledge me, beyond polite nods. I didn't contribute. I didn't have the energy to pretend I belonged. That's when my father appeared beside me. "Hey, Ellie," he said, patting my shoulder without really looking at me. "Having fun?" I nodded. "It's a beautiful venue." He snorted softly. "Too beautiful, if you ask me. Must have cost a fortune. But you know Victor always finds a way." There it was, casual, unquestioned. I hesitated, then asked carefully, "Did he mention who paid for everything?" My father blinked, genuinely confused. The venue, catering, all of it." He waved a hand dismissively. "Probably his in-laws. They've got money. Anyway, enjoy yourself." And just like that, he walked away. Something cold settled in my chest. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was anger, slow, deliberate, replacing the ache piece by piece. Not explosive, focused. Because this wasn't neglect, it was erasure. Intentional or not, the result was the same. I had been scrubbed from the story entirely. I stayed seated through the next few dances. I watched as group photos were taken, family photos, without anyone even glancing in my direction. I watched my mother cry happy tears as Victor danced with her, both of them glowing in the certainty that everything in their world was exactly as it should be. Then I heard my name again. I was near the hallway leading to the restrooms when I caught Victor's voice around the corner, sharp with laughter. He was talking to the maid of honor and one of the groomsmen. "I only invited her so she wouldn't complain." "To Mom," Victor said. "Have you seen what she wore? It's like she's trying to look successful." They laughed. "What does she even do?" someone asked. Victor scoffed. "Something with Wi-Fi and a laptop. Probably runs a blog for people who don't want real jobs." More laughter. "And she came alone," another voice added. "Of course she did," Victor replied. "Who would date her?" I stood there frozen, every word landing clean and precise, like a blade slipping between ribs. I wanted to believe he didn't mean it, that he was drunk, that he was posturing, that there was some explanation that softened the cruelty. But there wasn't. That tone, that casual superiority wasn't new. It was who he'd always been. And I had just paid $40,000 to sit in a room where people laughed about my worth. I don't remember walking back to my table, but somehow I did. I stared at the centerpiece like it was the only solid thing in the room. Something inside me finally broke, not loudly, not visibly. It just gave way. In its place came clarity. This wasn't about the wedding anymore, or the money, or even Victor. It was about a lifetime of being used, dismissed, and expected to smile through it. And as I sat there, hollow but sharp, one thought rose above all the others. I still had control of one very important detail. And that realization changed everything. I left the venue shortly after that, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was done pretending I wasn't awake. The drive back to my apartment was silent. No music, no podcasts. Just the low hum of the highway and the echo of my brother's laughter replaying in my head over and over until it lost its sting and became something else entirely, information. That night I didn't cry. I sat on my couch in the same dress I'd worn to the wedding shoes still on, staring at the ceiling, while the hours slipped by unnoticed. I thought I'd feel rage, maybe even triumph at the thought of finally standing up for myself. Instead, what settled over me was a kind of heavy clarity. The kind you get when a truth you've been avoiding finally runs out of places to hide. I had spent years telling myself I didn't need recognition, that I was above it, that I didn't care how my family saw me. But sitting there in the dark, I had to admit something I'd never allowed myself to say out loud. I wasn't okay with being invisible. I never had been. I just learned how to survive it. And worse than that, I had helped maintain it. I had downplayed my success, softened my language, avoided mentioning numbers, avoided mentioning wins, avoided anything that might make me seem too different, too threatening, too real. I told myself it was humility. In truth, it was self-erasure. I had made myself small so they wouldn't feel uncomfortable, and then I paid them to keep me there. That realization hurt more than anything Victor had said. At some point near dawn, I stood up and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop, not with the frantic energy I used to have when I was trying to prove something, but with something steadier, purposeful. I logged into my business dashboard, the one I hadn't really looked at in weeks. Most of my income ran quietly in the background. Automation systems, long-term clients, evergreen funnels. It had been designed that way on purpose. Quiet success in a loud world. But now quiet didn't mean invisible anymore. I started reorganizing everything, streamlining workflows, cleaning up client backlogs, rewriting service packages I'd been underpricing for years because I didn't want to seem too expensive. I reached out to 3 companies I'd been putting off pitching because some part of me still questioned whether I deserved the room. That version of me didn't exist anymore. As the sun rose, I remembered something Victor's wedding had accidentally reminded me of. A conversation I'd had weeks before the event with the venue manager, a woman named Carly. We'd spoken several times during the planning process because officially, I was the one handling the payments. At one point, she'd casually mentioned an option. "We can always keep a secondary card on file," she'd said, just in case of last-minute adjustments. At the time, I hadn't needed it. Now I realized how much that detail mattered. Victor had sent me his card information a week before the wedding, just in case the bar went over or something small came up. I remembered the message clearly. "Use this if needed. I trust you." He'd sent it without hesitation, without reading the fine print, without imagining I'd ever use it for anything significant. Because he never imagined I would. That wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was alignment. The story they told about me had never included agency, so they never bothered guarding against it. I didn't act immediately. I let the idea sit. I lived my life. I worked. I slept. I ate. I waited. I gave myself every opportunity to walk away from the edge and decide to let it go. But then the invoice arrived. It came automatically from the venue, a standard closing document once the event had been archived. Every charge listed neatly, every service accounted for. And at the very bottom, in small, unmistakable type, final balance pending, $40,000. Backup card on file ending in 8821. Victor's card. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for something dramatic to rise up inside me. Guilt, excitement, fear. None of it came. What I felt instead was calm. This wasn't about punishing him. It was about correcting the narrative, about refusing to keep carrying a burden that was never acknowledged, never respected, never even seen. I picked up my phone and called Carly. She answered on the second ring, just as cheerful as ever. I kept my voice steady, professional. "Hi, Carly. This is Lucy Medrano. I wanted to confirm something about the final invoice." She didn't hesitate. "Of course. Everything's ready to be processed whenever you are." I took a breath. "Go ahead and apply the balance to the backup card." There was a brief pause. "No problem at all," she said. "We have written authorization." And just like that, the story shifted. I hung up, not smiling, not shaking, just resolved. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be understood. I was done explaining, done cushioning, done absorbing. Whatever came next, I would meet it standing upright. The charge didn't feel real at first. $40,000 is an abstract number until it isn't. Until you imagine the moment someone sees it on their statement and realizes a story they've been telling themselves is about to collapse. But even then, I didn't feel vindictive. I felt finished. Like I had finally set something down that I'd been carrying far longer than I realized. For a few days, nothing happened. No calls, no messages, no fallout. I went about my life as usual, woke up early, worked through client projects, refined the new consulting packages I'd been putting together. But something had changed in how I moved through my days. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't second-guessing every decision. I said no without explaining myself. I closed my laptop at a reasonable hour and went for walks just because I could. That alone felt revolutionary. Then I decided to do something I'd been circling for years, but never committed to. I started filming. I'd had the outline for a digital course sitting in a folder on my computer for months untouched. Every time I opened it, a voice crept in asking who I thought I was to teach anyone anything. That voice sounded suspiciously like my family, like Victor, like the laughter behind the wall at the wedding. That voice was gone. I filmed every day for 4 weeks, scripts in the morning, recording in the afternoon, editing at night. I didn't announce it. I didn't tease it online. I just worked, quietly, deliberately. I called the course, The Invisible Professional Building Real Success Without the Noise. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't aspirational nonsense. It was practical, grounded, and honest, made for people who didn't fit the mold but still wanted to thrive. When I launched it, I expected modest results. Within 2 weeks, it earned more than I'd spent on the wedding. A month later, it doubled. At the same time, I started changing how I showed up with my family. Or rather, how I didn't. When my mother called, I let it go to voicemail. When she texted, I didn't rush to respond. When Victor sent a casual message asking if I could help him edit a video montage from the wedding for social media, I ignored it entirely. They noticed. I know they did because they stopped asking me directly and started asking other people. Mutual acquaintances. Distant relatives. I heard about it from Jeremy, an old family friend who had always treated me like a human being instead of an accessory. He forwarded me messages without commentary, letting them speak for themselves. Is Lucy okay? She's been weird lately. She's probably embarrassed about something. She always goes through phases. That last one lingered. Another one of her phases. Like my independence. My career. My entire existence was a temporary malfunction they were waiting to resolve. I felt the familiar sting, but it didn't land the way it used to. Instead of shrinking, I felt something harden into place. Resolve, maybe. Or acceptance. Then Victor's email arrived. Subject line, "Hey Ellie." The body was light, almost playful. He said he'd gotten a strange alert from the venue about a large charge on his card. Asked if I'd used it by accident. Mentioned that Carly wasn't picking up and that he was kind of freaking out, LOL. He ended it with a casual, "Miss you." I read it once, then again. There was a time when I would have panicked. Called him immediately. Tried to smooth it over. Apologized for upsetting him even though I'd done nothing wrong. But this wasn't that time. I didn't respond. 4 days passed. Every morning I opened the email, reread the words, and closed it again. I let the silence do the talking. Let him sit with the discomfort of not being able to charm or control his way out of a situation for once. The charge had gone through. Clean, final. And for the first time in my life, I had leverage, not because I wanted power over my brother, but because I finally had power over myself. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the truth catching up. Victor's second email arrived the following morning, and the shift in tone was immediate. No greeting, no jokes, no casual warmth. Just a subject line that read, "We need to talk." He wrote that the charge had posted, that it wasn't funny, that his spouse was furious, and his in-laws were asking questions. He said he couldn't afford this right now. Said weddings were stressful and that I should have called him first. Said he thought I was helping, not doing something like this. I closed the email without replying. The silence stretched, and with it, the pressure. My mother called 3 times in one day, leaving increasingly tense voicemails. In the first, she sounded confused. In the second, worried. By the third, she was angry. She said I had embarrassed Victor, that his spouse's family was upset, that this wasn't how family handled things. I didn't return the calls. For years, I had been the emotional shock absorber, quietly taking the impact so everyone else could stay comfortable. But this time, I let the discomfort travel back to where it came from. I let it land in the rooms where decisions had been made without me, jokes had been told at my expense, and stories had been rewritten to exclude my existence. Behind the scenes, my life kept expanding. The course continued to grow. Messages came in daily from people thanking me for putting words to something they'd felt for years, but never articulated. I booked new consulting clients without negotiating my worth down to something palatable. I upgraded my workspace. I slept better. One evening, while packing up after a late shoot, my business partner, Daniel Harper, a man I'd met through a consulting forum months earlier, asked me if I was close with my family. The question was gentle, unassuming. "I have one," I said after a pause. "I'm just not sure they ever saw me." He nodded, no follow-up, no advice, just understanding. That simple acknowledgement settled somewhere deep in my chest. A week later, the invoice arrived again, this time forwarded, by Carly confirming the event had officially closed. No disputes, no reversals, everything documented, everything final. That was when I made my next move. I called Carly and told her to expect a dispute attempt. I asked her not to reverse anything unless legally required. She remembered everything: the authorization, the emails, the approval. She assured me the venue would stand firm. Then I reached out to two relatives who had always been kind to me, distant enough to stay neutral, close enough to be trusted. I didn't ask them to fight my battles. I asked them to watch, to listen, to remember. Meanwhile, Victor escalated. His messages grew shorter, then longer, then desperate. He accused me of blindsiding him, of ruining his marriage, of humiliating him in front of people who mattered. Each word revealed something I'd always known, but never fully accepted. He wasn't upset about the money. He was upset about losing control of the narrative. And that was when I decided I wouldn't explain myself. I would let the truth arrive on its own terms. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A post-wedding family dinner was being planned, an intimate gathering to relive memories, share photos, and thank everyone who had helped. My name wasn't on the group message, but it didn't need to be. I knew about it anyway. I wasn't going to attend as the quiet sister who sat in the corner. If I showed up at all, I would arrive as myself fully, unmistakably, and without apology. I began to prepare. I didn't announce that I was coming. In fact, I made sure no one associated my name with the dinner at all, at least not in the way they expected. 2 days before the event, I called the restaurant Victor had chosen and quietly prepaid for a private room under my full name. No notes, no instructions beyond a simple request when the party arrived, confirm the reservation exactly as it appeared. Then I prepared the only thing that mattered. The slideshow wasn't flashy, no dramatic music, no captions dripping with sarcasm, just facts arranged in the order they had actually happened. I uploaded the file to a shared drive the restaurant could pull up on the room's screen before the meal. I titled it plainly, Wedding Contributions. Slide 1, a photograph of the venue, elegant and serene, with the total cost listed beneath it. Slide 2, a screenshot of Victor's message to me. Use this if needed. I trust you. His card details visible unedited. Slide 3, the final receipt, stamped and dated, showing the charge applied to his card. Slide 4, a single sentence, black text on a white background. Thank you for your kind words at the reception. I heard every one of them. That was it. I wasn't going to stay for the dinner. I didn't want applause. I didn't want an argument. I wanted the truth to arrive without me in the room to soften it or absorb the fallout. The night of the dinner, I didn't dress up. I stayed home, made tea, and turned my phone face down on the table. 2 of my relatives, the ones I trusted, were there, not to intervene, just to observe. According to them, it started pleasantly enough. Victor and his spouse arrived smiling, handing out small printed photo books of the wedding. Personalized messages. Gold embossed covers. Nothing for me, of course. My parents arrived next, followed by a handful of extended family members. Everyone chatted, everyone laughed. Then the hostess appeared. Party of 12 under Lucy Medrano, she said brightly. The room went quiet. Victor laughed, first short and forced. That must be a mistake. The hostess checked her tablet. It's fully paid for. She also requested that you view a short presentation before dinner. Shall I start it now? Victor hesitated. His spouse nodded, assuming it was sentimental, maybe even a peace offering. The screen lit up. By slide 2, the smiles were gone. By slide 3, Victor's spouse was staring at him, color draining from her face. By slide 4, no one spoke. Someone asked the question I'd been waiting years to hear. Did Lucy pay for the entire wedding? Victor tried to answer. He stumbled. He minimized. He reframed. He said I'd offered to help, that he didn't know it was the full amount, that things had gotten confusing. His spouse didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You told me your parents covered the venue, she said quietly. You told me my family handled the bar. You said you planned everything. I did plan it, Victor said, panic sharpening his words. She helped. You humiliated her, his spouse said, at the wedding. That's when my mother spoke, trying to regain control the way she always did. She never asked for credit. If she wanted recognition, she should have said something. One of my relatives corrected her calmly. She asked not to be credited, out of kindness. The room fractured after that. Victor's spouse stood up. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just said, I need air, and left. Victor followed, calling her name, his voice breaking in a way I'd never heard before. The dinner never recovered. I didn't hear about it until later when my phone finally buzzed. A single message from one of the relatives who'd been there. It landed, exactly the way it needed to. I set my phone down and finished my tea. The fallout didn't come all at once. It rippled outward, slow and inevitable, like a stone dropped into still water. I wasn't there to witness it in real time, and that felt intentional, almost merciful. For once, I wasn't standing in the center of the storm trying to explain myself. The truth was doing the work for me. Victor called the next morning. I let it ring. He left a voicemail that started angry, slid into confusion, and ended somewhere close to pleading. He said I'd blindsided him, that I'd humiliated him in front of his spouse and our parents, that I'd ruined something that was supposed to be happy. He never once asked why I'd done it. He never once mentioned what he'd said about me at the wedding, or the way I'd been erased. The story was still about him. I didn't return the call. My mother tried next. Her voice was clipped, controlled, the way it always got when she felt things slipping beyond her ability to manage them. She said I'd gone too far, that families didn't handle conflict this way, that Victor was under a lot of pressure and I should have been more understanding. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finally paused waiting for my apology, I said calmly, I paid for the wedding because I thought it might finally earn me respect. It didn't. I'm done negotiating my worth. She didn't respond. After that, the calls slowed, then stopped. The story spread anyway. Not because I told it, but because it was impossible to contain. People talked. Screenshots circulated. Questions were asked that no one could deflect anymore. The narrative my family had relied on for years that I was directionless, dependent, somehow lesser collapsed under the weight of documented reality. And I didn't lift a finger to push it. I moved a month later. Not to disappear, but to expand. I bought a house in a quieter part of the country, surrounded by trees and water, the kind of place that felt like a deep breath. I paid in cash. The first morning I woke up there, sunlight spilling across the floor, I realized how little space my family occupied in my thoughts anymore. My work continued to grow. I launched a second course. The platform scaled beyond anything I'd imagined when I was still doubting myself. I took meetings when I wanted to. I said no when I didn't. For the first time, my life felt like it belonged to me. The relationship I'd quietly been building with Daniel Harper deepened naturally, without drama or power games. He never questioned my choices, never made me feel like I needed to earn my place beside him. When I finally told him the entire story from childhood to the wedding to the dinner, he listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You didn't burn anything down." "No," I replied. "I just stopped holding it together for them." I didn't go back for holidays. I didn't send cards. I didn't announce milestones. The distance wasn't punishment, it was peace. 2 relatives stayed in my life, the ones who'd seen me clearly, even when it wasn't convenient. That was enough. Sometimes late at night, the memory of the wedding still surfaces. The laughter behind my back, the speeches that erased me, the moment I realized how normal my invisibility felt to them. But then I remember the dinner, the silence when the truth appeared on the screen, the way the story finally corrected itself without me having to raise my voice. I didn't ruin my brother's wedding. He did. I just turned on the lights.